KJ Miller, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to join you.
KJ, let's go back in time 10 years. You were graduating from Harvard.
Yes.
I saw that you were in the retail practice of Deloitte.
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of envision how things were brewing in your head at the time. What was happening then? What were you thinking? How did we go from that Harvard Business School, Deloitte, to I got to start my own makeup brand?
Oh, yeah. Well, to tell you how we got here, I actually have to start to the beginning of Harvard Business School because I went to business school knowing I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But I didn't really know how to get there. And so I had basically this hypothesis that being surrounded by really smart business people, learning, at one of the best business schools in the world, digging into case studies, getting into the mindset of business experts, that all of that would somehow mold me and shape me into the entrepreneur I wanted to be. And mind you, there weren't actually that many startups coming out of Harvard Business School at the time. Stanford was much more known for that. Even MIT, to a certain extent, was more known for that. And so Harvard was known for churning out consultants and, which I did become a consultant briefly, consultants and PE guys and investment bankers, but not necessarily all that well known for churning out entrepreneurs. But I just felt like, you know what? I can make it happen. Just get me in the room with the right people and learning all the things I need to know, and I can take that and mold that into some form of an entrepreneurial career. So that's what I went to HBS to do. When I graduated, I still had that same goal to own my own company, but I didn't necessarily know what I wanted it to look like. And actually, when I graduated, I was running a startup at the time that I had started my second year of business school, but I was running it very half-heartedly. It was a hair salon business called Extensive Salon. And my heart just wasn't in it anymore, but I sort of felt like, well, this is what I came here to do. I should try it. And at the same time, I had accepted the offer to come to Deloitte full-time as a management consultant. So the salon thing was kind of happening, kind of not happening. I knew, I was like, I'm not really going to be able to do this while I'm working full-time in consulting. So eventually I let it go. And I just told myself, I'll find my way to the right company to run. It's not going to happen right now, but I'm not giving up on this dream. I'm going to pay back some of my business school loan and make some money, and then figure out what the right business is for me to start. So I went into business school knowing that's what I wanted to do. I left business school knowing that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't leave feeling like I have to make it happen right now, which I do think some people who want to pursue entrepreneurship put themselves on, a clock of some sort and say it's got to be now or never. And I never felt that way. I felt like it's going to happen, but not right now. And I was lucky enough that my good friend who I graduated with, Amanda Johnson, she and I both moved to New York. She also was very interested in entrepreneurship. And so we said, look, let's figure out if there's something we can do together. And so we would meet periodically while we were both working full time and just have conversations about, well, what are we both good at? What are we both interested in? What are problems we both have that we think we might be well suited to solve? And we landed on beauty because she said to me, I've been looking for the perfect nude lipstick for 3 years. And I replied, that's so funny. I can't find any lipstick I like, much less a nude lipstick. And that was the moment for both of us when we realized, okay, we've got something here, because we both have money to spend on beauty, but we both feel underserved by the options that are out there. This is a real problem, or at least let us figure out if it's a real problem for more than just the two of us. And that's kind of how we got started.
Why didn't they have nude lipstick?
Well, that's a great question. Why didn't they have nude lipstick? Because a nude lipstick is simply an easy everyday color that is developed to match either your skin tone or your lip tone. And if you are a Caucasian woman, you most certainly have not, if you don't wear one or don't have one, you've definitely seen a million of them that could potentially work for you, because they make, when I say they, I mean most beauty brands, make lipstick in a million different shades of pink and nude, and I want to say pink and tan and beige and peach and just every variation of those shades you could think of, you can find. But my lips are not pale pink. They are not beige. They are not peach, right? So when I wanted a nude lip color, I couldn't wear the million that were out there being billed as nude. And so I think it really just came down to the fact that a lot of brands back then didn't care that much about developing products that were nuanced and complex enough to work for a myriad of skin tones, and in particular, deep skin tones. And since they didn't care, we decided we would care and we would take up that fight.
So your two motivations, one, you knew you were going to be an entrepreneur. You definitely was going to start. You were going to start something. You just didn't know what. And then Amanda and you decided that this is a problem that we both have. It has to be somebody else's problem too. So now we have two reasons. And now the next step is, you said that, is this a common problem for more people? So the next step is the research. So what did you do? What did you find out then?
Yeah, so we pretty immediately put together a survey and sent it out to hundreds of women of color in our network. And the survey was pretty simple. And I actually, when I'm advising, mentoring or talking to my students, will advise them on putting together a survey. And I usually will say, like, this thing should be pretty simple. You don't want to ask too much of people, right? So like maybe 10 questions. You never want to have to make them click to like page 2 of the survey. If they're clicking to a second page, you're losing people, okay? Keep it simple. And what we were trying to understand really was, number one, are you happy with the beauty options that are out there, right? And how happy are you? So we did most of our questions on a gradient, like on a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied are you with your existing beauty options? That was one of the primary focuses of the survey. And then 2, we were trying to understand sort of like what they would be willing to spend if they had the perfect beauty brand. So those were, I think, the primary objectives of that initial survey. And we would go on to do additional surveys. We also did focus groups once we started hand making the products. We would invite people over to try them so we could get feedback on the products. But it all started with a survey. And in that survey, we learned that the vast majority of women of color who we surveyed said they were not happy with existing beauty options. They could not find a nude lipstick that worked for them. They were having to mix different shades together to get their right foundation and everything else. So we learned, okay, this is broader than just the two of us. There are a lot of people who feel this way.
Mm-hmm. So what did the survey results say? People overwhelmingly wanted this, or was it kind of like, well, did it feel like it's a nice to have or it's a must have? What was your feeling after looking at the survey results?
I mean, so the majority of the survey, yes, we did ask questions towards the end about, if we launched the perfect nude lipstick, how much would you be willing to pay for it? If it existed, how much would you be willing to pay for it? And that actually did help us guide where we would end up from a pricing perspective. But most of the questions were not about, hey, would you buy this product if we made it? What we really were trying to understand is this pain point that we have a real pain point for other people? Because sometimes people will say, it's almost a little bit too leading of a question to focus on, if I made you this hypothetical thing that was perfect for you in every other way, would you want it? If someone phrases something like that, you'd be like, yeah, I guess so, if it's perfect for me in every way. But I don't know how useful that is for me. But what is useful for me at that time was understanding, is the pain point real? And is it painful enough? Do enough people think this is a problem? Because if we had gotten that survey back and only maybe 40% of the women said that they couldn't find products for them, or, they said something to the effect of, in rating how satisfied they were on a scale of 1 to 5, most of them said 4. Now, this pain point isn't sounding so painful. And that doesn't mean we wouldn't have gone after it, but I don't think we would have been convinced at that stage to go after that. But because the survey came back with very stark results of the vast majority of women saying, we are dissatisfied We do not have brands that we like or trust or that we have fallen in love with. We do not feel like we are being properly served by this industry. I mean, these were stark results. And so that's what gave us the confidence to say, okay, there's a real problem here. Now let's see if we can set about solving it. So it wasn't so much, is the survey telling us everybody wants Mented? I mean, we didn't even have a name for it yet, right? Like we didn't have any products to show them. We didn't have anything. It was more, does the survey tell us there's a real problem here? And it definitely said that.
Mm-hmm. How much would you be willing to pay for it? So since we're talking about pricing, let's nerd out a little bit because this is one thing that I like. So folks who are watching and listening who are at the point of pricing their ideal product, Google Van Westendorp. So Van Westendorp technique, it's a pricing survey, but it's an interesting. It has 4 questions. So instead of saying asking for one price, you ask for 4 prices. One of them is, how much is too low that this thing would feel like it's low quality? How much would be too high that it's completely out of the question? How much feels just right that this is a bargain? And how much is just a little bit too high, but it's not out of the question, you might still pay for it. So then if you ask 4 questions like this, then there's a way to kind of look at it, to kind of like price it just right. So when I learned that, I was like, this is pretty cool. So it's a good thing to know, like, you know, for folks if they're... So now you mentioned, you know, mixing at home, making at home. This is one of my favorite parts of these kinds of conversations when entrepreneurs are experimenting with recipes in their kitchen, or they're learning how to mix something like a skincare product, or they're finding a chemist somewhere. They're working with them very closely. So I read, I think, that you learned how to make lipstick from a YouTube video and started. I'd love to know about this. How did you make the first batches at home and started testing with people?
Yeah, well, I stand by that you can learn just about anything on YouTube. And I remember when we decided to go down this path of developing lipstick and creating a brand, our first instinct was to try to find a manufacturer, because obviously we weren't chemists, we weren't manufacturers, we had never made lipstick. So our first instinct was to try to find one. And, you know, we started making phone calls, and what we kept hearing was, first of all, a lot of the manufacturers we spoke with essentially didn't really understand what it was we were trying to do. When we would say we want to develop nude lipsticks for women of color, they would say, okay, we've got nude lipsticks. We can send you some of our stock shades. And, you know, we were like, but we don't want your stock shades, because your stock shades are the shades that we see on shelves that don't work for us. We want to develop new shades that work for us. And because we were nobodies, we weren't a real brand, they were all sort of like, so you want me to just start mixing and matching and coming up with custom shades for you, and who are you, right? So we didn't really get much traction there. And I just started to wonder, honestly, like, if that was even the route I wanted to go, and could I do it myself? And so I remember sitting down and typing into YouTube how to make lipstick, because I was like, all these people on YouTube, one of these people is out here making a lipstick. They gotta be. And they were. In fact, many, many people were. And I'm sure by now it's exploded to many, 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 many more people. And so I found enough videos to piece together, okay, this is what I need. And you don't need much. That's the other great thing about starting with lipstick. There aren't that many ingredients. You need some sort of oil, some sort of wax, and some sort of colorant. You need to heat it up, and then you need to let it cool in a lipstick mold. Okay, so it's not rocket science. And so once I saw what it was that you needed, I was like, oh, I can buy all those. I can buy a mold, I can buy oil, I can buy wax, and I can buy colorants, and we can start.
And where do you buy them? Just wherever?
A lot of the things. So we bought Alibaba. Alibaba has a lot of the stuff that you need. That's where we bought our lipstick mold. The colorants, I actually forget exactly. That just took some Googling, because what we learned on YouTube was, like, you actually buy the color, the powdered colors, or the creamed colors, like the emollients. So you could buy all of these things. So it just took some light Googling, and we bought it all and just started experimenting in our apartments, based on, having watched some videos and feeling like, okay, we've got a good idea of how we want to start. And started experimenting. And it actually did not take us long to develop our original 6 shades that we launched with. We probably got at least to like iteration 1 of all 6 of those shades in a couple of weeks. It was not an extremely long process at all.
So now we started making our first batch and people are liking it. How did we start ramping up? When did you know that? At this point, Amanda and you are still working at your full-time jobs, right? You're kind of doing a side nights and weekend side hustle.
Correct.
This is an important transition point for folks as well, because, you know, when do you make a decision? When is the right time to cut it off, that I got to go full time with this thing? When did you feel that? And what was that feeling like?
Yeah. Well, I would say we were doing the making lipsticks, sending out lipsticks, getting feedback, all of that for a good year before we quit our jobs. And part of that is because the feedback portion is so important. I think I've spoken to entrepreneurs and worked with entrepreneurs who get so caught up in the making of the product or the service or the website or whatever it is. They're so excited about that piece that they forget about the feedback piece. And so they get so far down the path, whatever the path is, and then they launch it to the world, right? And at that point, you're just sort of crossing your fingers like, I hope all this work didn't go, isn't for naught. Whereas our approach was much more iterative. And we were getting feedback every step of the way. So that's why it took us here, that and the fact that we did have full-time jobs. So we would make, every weekend, we would make a big old batch of lipsticks and then mail them to as many people who were willing to try them as possible. And these are primarily influencers from Instagram and YouTube who we had reached out to and said, hey, we're 2 girls, we're starting a new brand, we'd love for you to try our lipsticks. If you're willing, let us know, we'll send you a shipment. And we were shipping out sometimes 10, 20, 30 packages every weekend. And then we would wait and see what those people said. Do they like it? Do they hate it? Do they want something lighter, something deeper? We knew before we even launched what our product extension would look like because of all the feedback we had gotten prior to launch about our shades. So there was so much of that happening. Okay, a good year. Now, when did we actually make the decision to go full time? We waited until we were raising venture capital, and because we knew we weren't going to, we weren't going to be able to fund this on our own. And so I said I wanted to wait until we had a term sheet in hand before we went full time. And mind you, a term sheet isn't the same as having the funding in the bank. But I felt like if we've got a term sheet, that's someone believing in us enough to put forward, a term sheet and a piece of paper saying, I believe in this, here's what I want to invest in under these terms. That felt like enough of a vote of confidence to me for us to quit our jobs. And we did. We got our term sheet. I quit my job maybe a week later. I was not playing, but I set myself that milestone. And that is something that I say often to founders. When they ask me the question, when do I quit my job? I say, set yourself a milestone. I can't tell you what that milestone should be for you, but set yourself a milestone and stick to it. So if you've already launched, let's say you've already launched, you're selling your product or whatever it is on Etsy or on Amazon or something, maybe you say, I'm going to wait until I'm consistently doing $5,000 a month in sales. If I'm consistently doing $5,000 a month in sales, I'm going to feel good enough and quit my job. Or maybe for you, it's about how much savings you have. Maybe you say, okay, my milestone is I want to make sure I have a 6-month cushion in my savings account, 6 months of living expenses, because that feels like enough runway for me. You can set any milestone you want, but set one that makes sense and then stick with it, because the stick with it part is also important. As it gets closer, you might start feeling like, ooh, do I really want to leave this good job? But you set the milestone and you set it for a reason. And that's the time, once you hit that milestone, to take that leap and believe in yourself.
Yeah. So KJ, what you're describing, it sounds difficult, but I'm sure it was 10 times more difficult. And let's just try to break it down for folks who are listening, because, raising VC funds is hard on its own. And I'm an immigrant founder. You're a woman of color. It's like doubly as hard. And then the situation you're describing is actually a chicken and the egg situation, where when you're trying to pitch your business and startup to a VC, They don't want you to be working at another job. They want to see full commitment that you should have already quit. You should have already been working on this. So like, that's actually a red flag for a lot of VCs where they would be like, oh, no, like you're not fully invested in this business. You're still working at the other job. So like that kind of works against you a little bit.
Yeah.
And despite that, and the other difficulty is, investing VC investments in DTC brands is a very controversial thing. Not a lot of people do it. And I know that I guess you've talked about the VC apocalypse for consumer products as well. So, how do you think that the environment was at the time you were raising VC money for a brand, and now, like, would you still do it like that?
Yeah. Oh, it's changed so much. When we were raising, because we really were doing the bulk of our fundraising for that first round in 2016. And we launched January 2017. And in 2016, there were a lot of people who were excited about investing in consumer products because this was the heyday of Warby Parker and Glossier and Harry's. And I think Allbirds had launched by then. I could be wrong about that, but I think Allbirds may have been launched by then. Dollar Shave Club. There were a lot of consumer product companies that had scaled pretty massively, bonobos. And the thing about consumer products that excited a lot of VCs was that one thing I've learned about VCs, they like to talk, they like to brag. And it's much easier to brag about an investment that a lot of people know about, right? Like, yeah, SaaS is, you can make a lot of money in SaaS, but most people don't know anything about whatever that little SaaS thing that you just invested in. Nobody knows about that. Nobody cares about that. People in the VC community care about it. Okay, but I'm talking about when you're at your dinner party, when you're out getting drinks with your PE friends and your whatever friends, your doctor friends and lawyer friends, you want to be able to name drop something they've heard of. In consumer products, everyone has to shop consumer products. So when you get to say, I invested in Warby Parker, I invested in Glossier, I invested in Mented Cosmetics, people hear that and they're like, oh, okay, they get it. So I say all that to say, at that time, VCs were excited about the fact that there were a number of consumer brands really scaling, getting these unicorn valuations, and excited to be able to be backing something that people knew what the hell it was. Okay. So that's the time period I was raising in. And I do feel very blessed because, like you mentioned, I am a woman of color. So there were a million things stacked against me, but I at least had that going for me. People were excited to invest in consumer products at that time. And in particular, D2C companies, which we were. So I had that going for me. Now things have changed so much because those same D2C brands that VCs were so excited to chat about and talk about have not, for the most part, hit profitability. So they scaled and scaled and scaled. Many of them even went public, still have not become profitable and have watched their stock prices drop as a result. So now you have VCs looking around and saying, oh, this didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. Consumer products aren't nearly as sexy as I thought they were 8-9 years ago. And that's the environment that we're in now when consumer product founders go out to raise. So to answer your question, would I do it differently now? Absolutely, I would. I think I would do it differently now because I'd have to. I don't know that there are still consumer brands raising money, to be clear. I'm not saying it's not happening, but it is much, much harder to do. And the companies I am seeing getting funded now are companies that have bootstrapped and that are profitable, like already profitable by the time they start approaching VCs about joining the round. I'm also seeing it be a bit of a necessity to already have figured out retail, have at least one retailer that you're in, because they're seeing that tends to be a key to profitability once you can figure it out. So it's a different ballgame. And I think if you are doing traditional consumer products right now, it is something where you're going to need to be prepared to bootstrap, unless you're sort of that 1 in a million who a VC just sees and loves your product and is like, sure, great, I'd love to invest. I think you've got to be prepared to bootstrap. You've got to be prepared to hit profitability much sooner, call it like by year 2, if not just being profitable out the gate, and figure out retail before you're approaching a VC. And that is asking so much. I know it's asking so much. But honestly, I am seeing that be the bar a lot of companies have to clear right now.
Yeah, it's become a very difficult environment. When I sent my investor update for September to my investors, my first line was SaaS is dead. Don't invest in software companies anymore because AI is writing the code now. So it's very easily replicable. So who knows what the future is going to be. But it's definitely a very dynamic world right now. KJ, let's talk about growth and marketing. So what you built, you made the product. It started catching on some early traction. So let's kind of like in the first few years, what kind of growth and marketing motions were moving the needle for you? And what do you see working now? What are some of the marketing channels that work now and what doesn't work anymore?
Yeah. For us, social media was key. It is how we grew. It's how we got on the map because we were sending our products to influencers and those influencers were trying and talking about it. Social media was immediately extremely important for us and organic social media. We weren't paying anybody. We were just sending our products out and getting that organic traction. And then for us, we also saw that traditional PR was also really important for us because the beauty customer was still reading, clicking on articles that talked about, here are the top 10 nude lipsticks of the moment. Here's our favorite fall bronzers, blah, blah, blah. There are a million of these listicles. Traditional PR ended up playing a really important role for us as well. So I would say those two things in the beginning, in terms of customer acquisition, were the most important, social media and traditional PR. And to that point, we did hire a publicist early. And people have very mixed results with publicists. We happened to find, and I cannot remember how we got introduced to her, but our publicist was a woman of color, a Black woman, who had just phenomenal contacts in the beauty industry. So when she reached out to her Rolodex and said, there is an amazing Harvard grad founded beauty brand focusing on women of color. These girls are smart, they're ambitious, they're scrappy, and they're making products that work for all skin tones. When she reached out to her editors with that message, they cared. So I say that to say not all publicists are created equal. And we interviewed a bunch of publicists before we found her and landed on her. And she proved early and often that she could get us placements. There are so many
what kind of outlets?
What kind of outlets? So, and that's the thing. She was getting us placement in the outlets that mattered. So she was getting us into Cosmo and Glamour and Refinery 29 and Yahoo Beauty, which I didn't know anything about Yahoo Beauty. That ended up being huge for us. And Essence and, places where women were reading about products and specifically about beauty, Allure, the outlets that matter for what it is we were trying to do. She had the context there. So that, and the fact that she proved herself early and often was really, really important. Too often what I see from publicists, because I've now worked with more other types of publicists, is one, they take too long to get you placed anywhere, okay? It's not as if they don't get paid. They get paid every single month, whether they get you a placement. So you'll be paying them 2, 3, 4, 5 months before you even see a placement. And then the placement that they get isn't that interesting. So you do have to be careful and you want to make sure if you're signing on with a publicist, you have a good out clause. You're not signing something that says I'm committed for 12 months or even 6 months. Honestly, I think straight out the gate, someone should be willing to work with you on a month-to-month contract. Maybe at most they say, you've got to give me 3 months. That's the most I'd be willing to give somebody. because they need to prove that they can do what it is they're saying they're going to do. But for us in the beginning, PR was important and organic social was important.
And now, what's working now?
Now I would say social media is still just as important. But, retention channels started becoming extremely important to us very early on. So email, SMS, those channels are huge for us. We're blessed that we've built up a very large email subscriber base. So we do a lot of our revenue from that channel. Social media is still huge for us because that's where conversations are happening. And we just launched on TikTok Shop, if you can believe it. I wish we had launched there earlier, but we just launched on TikTok Shop.
Do you think it's too late? Do you think it's kind of plateauing a little bit? I've been seeing mixed comments about that.
No, I don't think it's too late at all. I don't think it's too late at all because the reality is, now I don't know this for a fact. I haven't seen the data. But my hypothesis is that the majority of TikTok users have still never shopped on TikTok Shop. They've seen it. They've scrolled past a bajillion different ads and a bajillion different people. They've probably added things to cart. Like they've seen something like, oh, that is interesting. They've added it to cart. But my guess would be that the majority of people have not yet purchased anything from TikTok, or not even the majority of people. I know that's true because the majority of people aren't on TikTok. The majority of TikTok users, my hypothesis, have not shopped TikTok Shop. So I think we're still at the very beginning of this thing. So even though I feel late because I started shopping on TikTok Shop months and months ago. So that's why I feel late. But in reality, as a brand owner, am I late? No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not late because most people are still not willing to pull the trigger on it because there's still a little bit of stigma, a little bit of like, TikTok is where I go to like be entertained. I'm not here to shop. I don't want TikTok to be commerce. I'm just here to watch my videos, whatever, what have you. People, there's still some hesitancy there. And that's a good thing for brand owners because that means it's not too late. They'll get over it, okay? They'll get over it. Eventually, they will shop on TikTok Shop. I have no doubt about that. But most people right now are not doing it.
KJ, knowing what you know now, after almost a decade of experience in building a product and a brand, if you wanted to start a new brand, a completely different one, and it can be any field, it can be any category, what would you do?
Well, that's an interesting question because in some ways I'm doing that as a content creator. I consider content creation to be not only my next career, but in some ways my next product. It's just that my product is myself and my knowledge and my, expertise. And so I am having to, in real time, figure out how do I want to package me as a brand, which honestly just isn't something I've had to do that much. To a certain extent I have. When you're pitching VCs, you're not just pitching your brand, you're pitching yourself. But as a creator, I am very much pitching myself every time I make a video. I've got 250,000 followers now on TikTok. So every time I pick up my phone and I make a video, I am in some ways packaging myself as either an expert or a humorist of some sort. And I'm now having to figure out, how do I really want to make this into a business, right? How do I want to make this into a sustainable business? How do I want to branch out? So in some ways, I feel like I already am starting my second brand. It's just the brand is me. But I have a feeling that's not what you meant. So I try and answer the question that you intended, which was if I were going to start something completely new, not packaging myself. And the question was like, how would I go about it? That was the question.
Or like, what would you pick? Like, would you still pick the same product you picked, like lipstick or beauty, or would you say that, like supplements or something, or clothing, or
No, you know what I would do next? I love that I'm in beauty. I love beauty. But if I were going to start something from scratch again, it would not be in beauty. Okay, I've had enough beauty to last me a lifetime, so it would not be another beauty brand for sure. I actually think it would be something a bit more service oriented. Like I toyed around for a little bit after I moved here to Ohio. My move went so terribly. My movers were so terrible. They ruined so much of my stuff. Oh, it was the biggest headache. It was the worst thing that has ever happened to me. And I thought, I'm starting a moving company. And I did. I registered a domain. I went pretty far down this path. Eventually, I was like, okay, you were just mad. You don't actually want to start a moving company right now. You were just angry. But it did really get me thinking about starting a more service-oriented company. I didn't do a service company when I started Mented because when I had tried, with my first business being a hair salon, I learned people, like I don't want my products to be people because people are unpredictable. I want my products to be products. But I think now I'm at an age and stage where I feel a bit more confident in my ability to lead people and create a service-based business where the service is reliable and predictable, and put the sort of mechanisms and processes in place to get you that dependability and reliability. And I think it would just be a challenge, because I've been in the product space for so long. I think being in a service-based business would be a nice challenge. So yeah, maybe it would be moving, maybe it wouldn't be moving, but I do think it would be a service business.
Well, this is not what I expected to hear. What's so interesting, when you said that you would not do beauty, I laughed pretty hard because my first startup was the world's first concert subscription service. After working on it for 7 years, I didn't even want to listen to music anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to music anymore. I am doing talk radio, politics, and stuff like that now. So, I know how you feel. But, okay, final two-part question, KJ. Mm-hmm. Top 2 problems giving you a headache right now, and top 2 priorities you're excited about for the year.
Yeah. Top 2 problems. Well, one of the top 2 is something that's always a problem if you run a product company, and that's inventory management. It's never not going to be a headache. I don't care what anyone says. It's never not going to be a headache. When you've got inventory that needs to live in multiple channels, and mine does, it's got to live on my site. It's got to live on Amazon. I've got to monitor it for TikTok Shop. I've got to monitor it for my retail partners. Managing inventory across all of those channels is just always going to be a headache, and we're getting better at it. I've gotten better at it. I've got systems in place and models in place and people in place. It's still a headache because when you sell out of whatever your best seller is, no matter what channel it is, you feel it so acutely. And it's just the most frustrating thing in the world, knowing you're leaving money on the table, there's nothing worse. Okay. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is, I think for me, I do feel a little stretched thin. And so making sure that for myself, have the right systems in place to make sure I'm prioritizing what I need to prioritize when I prioritize it. And that's a more personal thing, but I am juggling a lot of balls. I teach at business school. I run Mented Cosmetics. I run another brand, Beauty Bakery. I am a content creator. I have a podcast. I'm doing a lot of things. So it's really important that I do each of them well and that I give my time where it needs to be given when it's important. So that's another thing that, keeps me up sometimes.
And what are you excited about? Top 2 priorities?
Top 2 priorities. Well, first of all, Mented has just relaunched. We didn't talk about this, but the company got acquired. And so in the acquisition, when the brand got acquired, we were in a financial hardship. And so we had not restocked a number of our best selling products. And so I said, once we're fully back in stock, I'm going to be so excited to run a relaunch campaign, and that's what we've been doing since the top of last week, and it's been met with such amazing reception. So I'm just so excited that we've been able to reconnect with so many customers and reintroduce ourselves to so many customers. We're seeing so many people post about it and share their love of the brand. I'm just so thrilled with fully being back and having the products that our customers have come to love us for. So that's number one. That's my number one priority. And I would say my number two priority, I strive to be a good manager of people, and I've got a team again. I went a little while with not having a team, again, pre-acquisition. Now post-acquisition, I've built up a team again. And so I'm getting back into the swing of things with being a good leader, being someone people can trust, someone who gives clear direction, someone who gives motivation for what it is we're doing and the journey that we're going on. And that's a big priority for me, because it's a blessing to have people who want to work with you and work for you and help carry out your vision. And it's something that I don't want to squander,
KJ Miller, thank you for sharing your journey with me.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks for having me.